Hi, and welcome to another episode of the I Alpha Project. My name is Pedro Ralvis, and I'm the host of these episodes. And today I wanted to touch on something that I picked up on that I really believe is a small problem that can create big issues in the long run. I came across a podcast from a guy I follow, James Nunn, Unleashed. Definitely worth a watch, guys. He's interviewed a variety of people, but there are some common influences that he has interviewed, and I see a common trait amongst them that tend to trigger me. So there is absolutely nothing wrong with the podcast or the people in it and their perspectives in it. But I do like to look at myself and see how I relate to certain comments and things that are in the podcast. And I like to be challenged. But I find myself particularly challenged with an episode he recently did with the female fighter. And I'll get you guys to check that one out. I won't name names. But they were talking, and she starts off. So, as you can see, mainly the topic of conversation is addressing the friendly community in fight gyms, which I completely agree with. I mean, it's definitely a supportive community. However, it starts off by saying that you can go to a fight gym and you don't have to fight. You do not have to fight. You can go for the fitness, you can go for the skill, the social aspect. And again, it's not based on how you look. It's literally just getting better at skills that you have. So it's not really a fashion parade that you literally can go try your skills, make some friends. She continues to express the fact that you do not have to fight. In fact, there are other people there that might be fighters and you can support them. So she goes on to saying that you can go to a fight gym, but you do not have to fight. I sincerely agree with what she means in the context of having a community, but I don't agree with that concept. You can go to a fight gym and not have to fight. I do think that is down to the simplest form. The biggest problem that we have in society today is this labeling that we put on ourselves, but without doing the work. And then it stems into other things. And you don't realize how a small comment like that can actually create a bigger impact in your overall life. If I use the thing, you go to a fight gym, but you don't have to fight. Number one, I strongly disagree. Coming from a fighting background myself, one of the things that I disliked the most was actually fighting, was entering competitions. I was afraid, I was scared. There were so many emotions. The day before the fight, you're on edge. The night before, you don't sleep. Just before walking in the ring or the mat, you literally, I'm running to the toilet, sweating, wanting to give up, wanting to quit, wanting to pull out. So this is me personally. But I'd have to learn a skill where I could calm my brain, calm my mind. Being a heavyweight back then, I was also fighting a lot bigger guys. So I find myself really challenged by the prospect of getting in the ring. Once I was in the ring, I was able to do quite well, and it relied on my skill. But knowing that I had to actually go into a fight, that my skill was going to be challenged, and when we train and we create a safe environment for that, and ideally in competitions you have a safe environment for it as well. But if you're out on the road, there's no such thing as a rules or referees. So if I'm going to go into a fight gym for fitness, that's great. Absolutely. Go to a fight gym and train for fitness. But then you're literally missing the main aspect of what a fight gym is there for. It's not about there to teach you violence. It's there to teach you control in violent situations or stressful situations. And that control can be from avoiding a situation to actually being able to defend yourself in a situation. And unfortunately, in life, there are those moments that we cannot escape that. So when you tell somebody you can go to a fight gym, but you don't have to fight, I've yet to meet a boxer that calls himself a boxer without actually walking into a ring first. A lot of people will say, I'm training boxing. I've got that with people that are CrossFit trainers. They will actually go and train CrossFit, but they don't call themselves CrossFit athletes until they've actually entered a competition. It's a completely different feeling. And why I argue with that point is because something as simple like that creates a system and a belief that you can be in a relationship, but you don't have to be committed. You can go to dinner, but you don't necessarily have to eat. That's all fair and well. I mean, if that works for you, but unfortunately, we tend to label ourselves like we are these things, but we haven't put the work in. And a lot of times you'll see that even in professions or jobs that people take. They call themselves something, but then they don't actually follow through with what they have. They keep themselves in a comfort zone. I would argue if you're going to join a fight gym, it's because you're voluntarily putting yourself in an uncomfortable environment. and getting yourself into the ring is an uncomfortable feeling. I think it takes a lot away from the professional boxers or even the people that train, that are world champions, that go to a fight gym, put themselves in these situations in order to create a better skill, a better mind frame, a better character. They face their demons, but then you've got somebody who hasn't put themselves in that situation talking to you and behaving as if they're your peer. No, they may have a deeper understanding. There's definitely appreciation and respect for what you do, but you're not like me. You're not like other fighters. Unless you've actually walked into the ring and had a fight and experienced that for yourself, win or lose, then you can call yourself a fighter. And I think this sense about, well, we're going to do something, but we're not going to be fully committed to the process is what the problem is in society today, especially when it comes to dating and relationships. A lot of us want a relationship, but we don't want the commitment. We don't want the responsibilities. We don't want the hard work. We want everything to be simple and easy. So what happens is we find ourselves just coasting through and staying within our comfort zone. The worst part is that majority of the time our comfort zone is actually quite uncomfortable because we're not happy. There's constant triggers. We're not really looking at ourselves and challenging ourselves to be in that environment. And the one thing that I find interesting is that she really wasn't challenged too much on that comment. She's promoting fight gyms to a variety of people, and she was also asked as to what lessons from training can she then bring that out into the real world. So when I'm talking about fighting, guys, it's not about whether you win or lose. You can lose to a fight, but that still makes you a fighter. It might make you a bad one, or it depends who you lose against. That's another story. I personally was really good at fighting, especially good at blocking with my face. Like, I've been beat up more times than I can count, and I've lost more fights than I've won. But I've grown so much from that experience. And I also have a certain confidence within myself, and I know what it takes. And I also understand that when I'm practicing these skills, it's for a definitive purpose. I am practicing these skills not just for my physical health, but also for my functional ability. We have to execute what we learn. It's the same as saying you can read a self-help book, but not do the work. We want to be better. We want to discuss. We want to grow. We want to evolve. And the only time we can do that is by practicing self-control in those stressful situations. So, as an example, it's very, very easy to say, I'm doing a lot of personal development. And when my emotions are in check, when I deal with people, I'm actually look pretty functional. But if I become sensitive and my natural human nature takes over, I become irrational and reactive, then where does all that training go? So the reason I read all these self-help books and the self-personal development and do these self-awareness training is so that when I'm in that moment, that fight moment, I can then perform and use those skills that I've learned at its ability. So if I'm training to punch a bag and defend myself and create impact and speed and focus and all that thing, but I then don't put that in an environment to try it out, I'm never going to know where my skills range, where I can improve, where my weaknesses are, where my strengths are. So a lot of times when fighters fight, it's not just to say whether they're a good fighter, it's about personal development to show yourself where your weaknesses are. And that comes from losing. That's how we improve. So when I want to be in a relationship, I just don't want to be in a relationship with arguments. That's not commitment. A relationship has to have arguments and discussions. How we address those arguments and discussions, that's how we become better relationship people. How we become better at communicating within the relationship, controlling our emotions, being aware that I'm being reactive. My feelings are building up. I'm struggling to express my truth. I'm rather expressing my anger, and then learning to navigate that. And the same thing applies when you're in the ring. Those that have stepped in the ring, especially for the first time, know what it's like to have that pressure, knowing that that guy is out there to hit you as well, knowing that you've got to defend yourself, knowing there's a lot of people watching, that you've put 6 months of prep into this fight. So performing under that stress and testing your skills, I think, is a really vital part in calling yourself a fighter. It's being at work and dealing with the difficult situations, the difficult projects, the your colleagues, not agreeing on a certain point, finding a common ground, having the ability to have these difficult discussions is the only way to evolve. But nowadays, I find people are just avoiding that. And then if they don't avoid it, they attack it full on, but they don't bring in the skills they've learned. They raise their voice, they scream, they call names, they they belittle each other, they belittle themselves just by behaving that way. So I do think as a society, we need to take accountability for what we choose to do and just be realistic about that. I'm into health and fitness. What do you do for health and fitness? I like to take walks. I do a lot of like fight type training. I do CrossFit. I like to lift weights, but I don't call myself a CrossFitter or a fighter. I call myself somebody who's invested in his health and fitness. But if I'm actually going to promote something specific, um, you can train something, but as until you actually apply the knowledge you've learned and learn to apply it in stressful situations, you should never label yourself that, because I believe what you're doing is you're lying to yourself. You can say, I'm a really good person, I'm a really good partner, I'm a really good father. But unless I've been in those difficult situations that really decide whether I'm a good father or not, as an example, if my kid comes to me and they've done something terrible and I'm reactive to what they've done, but I want no abhorrence their consequences, I can justify it in my head, I'm being a good dad. But a good dad is somebody who controls his emotions. It's not about my journey. It's not about how my children's actions have affected me or have affected the perception of what kind of father I am with the child, but rather that it's affecting the child. And it's my job to control my own emotions, bring them down, and talk it through with my kid, try and understand their perspective, try to make them aware of their mistakes that I believe they may have made. And learning to do that, then I can step away and call myself a father. But if I'm just paying bills and picking up and dropping off, I'm not really a father, I'm just a babysitter. So I think a statement as simple as that, you can't call yourself a bodybuilder unless you actually put the work in and then test yourself against other bodybuilders. You can't call yourself a chess player unless you actually test yourself against other chess players. At the end of the day, it's about testing the skills you've learned and how you've applied them. So I think we need to choose what we want to do, what motivates us, not what we think other people will think is cool. I think we stop ourselves from evolving to our fullest potential when we're doing things based on our ego or based on what we think we might like. My son's very first competition, he was about 6 or 7 years old. And I've got a picture of him. He's there, pale ass, with his mitts up, his hands up, and he was scared shitless. It ended up that he won his competition and we put the work in and he did extremely well. But the main reason for that and why I put him in that situation, he was fully supportive, he was fully safe, but he got to experience what it really feels like to have to apply the skills you've learned and test the skills you've learned. And it is definitely not the same when you do a mock test at home versus when you actually have to go in and do your test. You can't call yourself a lawyer until you pass the bar exam. It's as simple as that. I think at the end of the day, taking complete ownership about what you choose to do and not cheating yourself from being that thing to the best ability that you can. I think that's really important in today's society. And I think when you start preaching and telling people that they can do things, but they don't have to reach a certain level, I think you're limiting them. And I also think that it's not about them reaching the level, it's about the effort to reach that level. You have to have that desire, and it's the only way that you're going to improve. Otherwise, you're only half-assing everything. You're only going to be a certain kind of partner. You're only going to be a certain kind of parent or a certain kind of boss or colleague or trainer, whatever the case is. You're not going to be fully invested. So test yourself, guys, push yourself, and above all, don't preach to people calling yourself something that you're not. That's my go-to. I hope that makes sense.